Chapter 1. Desert Whispers Under Endless Sky. The New Mexico desert stretches like an ancient ocean under the light of 10,000 stars. It's July 1947, and the night air carries stories older than memory itself. Out here, where the earth meets infinity, time moves at the pace of wind through sage, slow and eternal and peaceful. Mac Brazel knows this desert like other men know their own backyards. He spent 30 years watching over sheep on the J.B. Foster Ranch, 30 miles northwest of Roswell. Every sound belongs in his mental catalog. The distant call of coyotes singing to the moon, the whisper of wind through mesquite, the gentle rustle of his flock settling for the night. Tonight feels different, though. The sheep are restless, moving in slow circles under starlight that seems brighter than usual. Mac stands beside his pickup truck, steam rising from his coffee cup in the cool desert air, and gazes upward at a sky that appears to pulse with unusual energy. 3 nights ago, one hell of a storm passed through this country. Lightning danced across the entire dome of heaven like nature's own fireworks display. Thunder rolled and crashed in waves that shook the ground beneath his boots. Rain fell in sheets so heavy it turned the dry creek beds into rushing torrents for a few precious hours. But storms are common in July. What's got Mac's attention tonight is something he can't quite put his finger on. A feeling in the air, a sense that the universe is holding its breath, waiting for something extraordinary to unfold. The town of Roswell sleeps peacefully in the distance, its scattered lights forming gentle constellations against the desert floor. Main Street lies quiet under amber street lamps where the Palace Theater advertises the latest picture show. Children dream in their beds while parents sit on front porches, listening to radio programs and watching heat lightning dance on the horizon. This is America in 1947. The boys have come home from the war. There's optimism in the air, a feeling that the future holds possibilities beyond imagination. Television exists, but barely. Computers are theoretical concepts discussed by brilliant scientists. And space? Well, space is still the realm of Buck Rogers comic strips and Saturday matinee serials. Southeast of town, Roswell Army Airfield operates with quiet efficiency. Home to the 509th Composite Group, the outfit that dropped atomic bombs on Japan and brought the most terrible war in history to an end. Now they train with experimental aircraft that push the boundaries of what's possible in aviation. Strange reports have been filtering in from across the country lately. Pilots whispering about disc-shaped objects that hover silently, then streak away at impossible speeds. The newspapers call them flying saucers, a term coined just weeks ago by Kenneth Arnold after he spotted 9 mysterious objects near Mount Rainier in Washington. But here in the vastness of the high desert, such concerns feel distant as the stars themselves. This is a place of profound peace, of silence so complete you can hear your own heartbeat, of sky so vast it makes a man feel both insignificant and somehow connected to everything that exists. Mac checks on his sheep one final time, their white forms ghostly and beautiful in the starlight. Tomorrow will bring heat and work, and the endless routine of ranch life. Tonight belongs to wonder, and the sense that anything, absolutely anything, might be possible under this infinite canopy of stars. The desert keeps its secrets well. Ancient peoples walked this land and left their mysteries carved in stone. Spanish conquistadors passed through seeking gold that existed only in their dreams. Cowboys and outlaws and pioneers all left their marks on this vast landscape that swallows human ambition and returns it to the earth as dust. But sometimes, on nights like this when the stars shine with unusual brightness and the wind carries whispers from beyond the horizon, those secrets stir like seeds waiting for the right season to bloom. Somewhere high above, so high that earthbound eyes cannot detect it, something moves against the star field. No sound disturbs the desert silence. No light betrays its presence. It drifts like a feather on cosmic currents, following trajectories calculated by minds that have mapped the space between worlds. Whatever it is moves with purpose, guided by intelligence that has traveled distances beyond human comprehension to reach this small blue world spinning in its yellow star's gentle embrace. The technology that brought it here operates on principles that Earth's greatest scientists won't discover for decades, if ever. But technology, no matter how advanced, sometimes fails. Systems designed to operate flawlessly across interstellar distances can encounter variables that even the most sophisticated calculations cannot anticipate. And when such systems fail far from home, far from help, the consequences ripple outward like rings on still water. The desert wind grows gentler as midnight approaches, carrying the scent of sage and the promise of morning still hours away. Mac pours the last of his coffee onto the ground and prepares to return to the small cabin where he'll sleep until dawn calls him back to his duties. Above him, the stars continue their eternal dance, points of light that have guided travelers and dreamers since humans first looked up and wondered what lay beyond the horizon. Each star represents a sun, possibly warming planets, possibly nurturing life that might also gaze upward into their own night sky and contemplate the infinite possibilities that exist among the cosmic ocean of space. The universe is vast beyond imagining, distances so great that light itself takes years to cross them. Worlds beyond counting orbiting suns that burn with the same nuclear fire that warms the Earth. And in all that vastness, in all those billions of stars and trillions of possible worlds, the question that has haunted human imagination since our ancestors first kindled fire burns as bright as ever. Are we alone? Tonight, above a peaceful ranch where sheep graze under starlight and a weathered cowboy contemplates the infinite sky, that question moves closer to an answer than anyone on Earth could possibly imagine. The desert holds its breath. The stars keep watch. And somewhere in the darkness, mystery prepares to touch down on the ancient soil of New Mexico. Chapter 2. When Heaven Touched Earth. Dawn comes gently to the New Mexico desert, painting the eastern mountains in soft shades of rose and gold. The sun climbs slowly above the distant peaks, casting long shadows across rangeland that has witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations, the passage of countless seasons, the eternal dance between earth and sky. Mac Brazel rises before first light, as has been his habit for 3 decades. Coffee brews over a small campfire while he watches his sheep move peacefully across the desert floor. The morning air carries the sweet scent of sage and the promise of another blazing summer day in this corner of the world, where horizons stretch beyond imagination. He's thinking about that storm again, the one that passed through 3 nights back. Quite a show it was, with lightning that seemed to crack the very dome of heaven and thunder that rolled across the desert like the footsteps of giants. The sheep had huddled together, spooked by the electrical display that turned night into a flickering approximation of day. Now, as Mac walks his usual route across the ranch, something catches his eye that stops him in his tracks. Scattered across a narrow area that stretches maybe 3/4 of a mile, debris lies scattered like pieces of a puzzle thrown by careless hands. Mac approaches slowly, his boots crunching softly on the desert floor, still damp from that recent storm. Morning light reveals materials that don't belong in this pristine wilderness. Strips of something that looks like metal but weighs almost nothing. Pieces that might be wood but feel wrong somehow. And fragments of what appears to be foil, except this foil behaves like nothing he's ever encountered. Kneeling down, Mac picks up one of the metallic strips. It's incredibly light, so light it might be made of solidified air. But when he tries to bend it, the material resists with surprising strength. When he manages to fold it, the strip immediately returns to its original shape, perfectly flat, without a single crease or mark to show it was ever disturbed. Curious as hell, Mac thinks to himself, using the kind of language that comes naturally to a man who's spent most of his adult life alone with sheep and desert silence. The material feels warm despite spending the cool night under star-filled sky. When he holds a piece up to the morning light, it seems to shimmer with colors that shift like oil on water, displaying hues that have no names in any human language. The surface is smooth as silk but solid as stone, a contradiction that challenges everything Mac knows about how materials ought to behave. Some of the debris bears markings unlike anything in his experience. Not letters or numbers as he understands them, but symbols that flow like writing might look if created by minds that had never seen earthly script. The characters are beautiful in their own alien way, elegant curves and geometric patterns that seem to dance before his eyes, suggesting meaning just beyond the edge of comprehension. Mac gathers armloads of the strange debris, loading it into his pickup truck. Despite collecting what appears to be substantial quantities of material, the entire load weighs no more than a few bags of groceries. Yet each piece feels solid, important, as if these scattered fragments carry stories he cannot begin to understand. The drive to town takes 40 minutes along dirt roads that wind through some of the most spectacular desert scenery on Earth. Mesas rise like ancient monuments in the distance. Hawks circle overhead on thermals that lift them effortlessly toward the deep blue morning sky. It's country that makes a man feel both small and somehow connected to something greater than himself. Mac's first stop is Floyd and Loretta Proctor's place. They've been neighbors and friends for years, sharing the quiet companionship that develops between desert folk who understand that out here, neighbors matter more than they do in cities where people live stacked on top of each other like cordwood. Floyd examines the strange materials with the same wonder that Mac felt when he first discovered them scattered across his rangeland. The older man turns piece after piece over in his weathered hands, trying to make sense of what he's seeing. "Never encountered anything like this in all my years," Floyd admits, his voice carrying the slow cadence of a man who chooses his words carefully. "Light as a feather, but look here." He produces a sharp knife and attempts to cut one of the metal strips. The blade won't even scratch the surface. When he tries to puncture the foil-like material, the point slides off as if the substance were made of the hardest steel imaginable. "What do you reckon it is, Mac?" Loretta asks, her voice soft with genuine amazement. Mac shrugs, but his eyes hold the brightness of someone who has encountered genuine mystery. "Figured I might haul some pieces into town, show them to Sheriff Wilcox. Maybe someone out at the base would know what to make of it." The conversation flows easily, the way it does between old friends sharing something unprecedented. They examine each piece carefully, marveling at properties that seem to belong more in science fiction than reality. The way light plays across the surfaces, the way the materials feel simultaneously foreign and somehow familiar. Loretta prepares coffee while the men continue their examination. The kitchen fills with the comfortable sounds of rural domesticity, but underneath runs a current of excitement about the extraordinary discovery scattered across Mac's rangeland. "Could be from one of them experimental aircraft they test out at the base," Floyd suggests, though his tone carries doubt. He's seen plenty of military wreckage over the years. Planes from Roswell Army Airfield sometimes have accidents, but this material doesn't resemble anything in his considerable experience. "Could be," Mac agrees, though something in his voice suggests he's considering possibilities that stretch far beyond experimental aircraft. Outside, the morning continues its ancient progression toward noon heat. Clouds build slowly over distant mountains, promising another afternoon thunderstorm. The eternal cycle of weather and seasons that has played out in this desert for millions of years before humans walked the earth, and will continue long after they've returned to dust. But today feels like the beginning of something new, something that will change not just Mac's understanding of what's possible, but potentially humanity's grasp of its place in the vast cosmic ocean that surrounds this small blue world spinning around an ordinary yellow star. As Mac prepares to continue his journey to town, he takes one last look at the debris spread across Floyd's kitchen table. Each piece seems to whisper of distances beyond imagination, of technologies that operate on principles Earth's greatest scientists have yet to discover, of minds that have mastered the art of traveling between the stars. The sheriff's office awaits, and beyond that, questions that will echo through the decades like thunder rolling across infinite desert sky. Chapter 3. The Sheriff's Quiet Morning. Sheriff George Wilcox sits behind his desk on Main Street, watching the gentle rhythm of small-town life unfold beyond his office window. Roswell moves at the comfortable pace of a community where everyone knows everyone else, where the biggest excitement usually involves high school football games and the occasional Saturday night disturbance at one of the local watering holes. The morning sun slants through Venetian blinds, casting striped shadows across reports and paperwork that represent the routine business of keeping the peace in southeastern New Mexico. Traffic moves slowly along Main Street, The courthouse clock tower chimes 9 times, its bronze voice echoing off brick buildings that have stood here since before the turn of the century. Wilcox has been sheriff for 8 years, long enough to develop an instinct for unusual situations. He's handled everything from cattle rustling to domestic disputes, from bar fights to the occasional case of someone finding artifacts from the old Apache wars. This is country where history lies close to the surface, where the past has a way of revealing itself when you least expect it. The bell above his office door chimes softly as Mac Brazel enters, carrying a cardboard box that seems almost too light for its size. Mac's a familiar face around town, a steady man who minds his own business and treats his neighbors with quiet respect. But today something different shows in his weathered features, an intensity that suggests he's encountered something beyond his considerable experience. "Morning, Sheriff," Mac says simply, setting the box carefully on the wooden desk. "Found some debris out on the ranch after that storm we had. Thought you might want to take a look before I haul it out to the base." What follows is a conversation that will echo in Wilcox's memory for the rest of his life. As Mac unpacks his collection, the sheriff's office transforms into a place where the impossible becomes undeniably real. Each piece of debris challenges everything Wilcox thought he knew about materials and their properties. The metallic strips that refuse to stay bent. The beam-like structures covered in symbols that resemble no earthly writing system. Fragments of foil that behaves unlike any substance in his experience. Wilcox picks up one of the metal pieces, surprised by its lack of weight. The material feels substantial despite its lightness, solid and real under his fingers. When he attempts to fold it, the metal springs back to perfect flatness with a force that seems to come from within the material itself. "Mac," Wilcox says slowly, his voice carrying the careful tone of a man who's trying to make sense of something that defies rational explanation. "I've got to tell you, I've never seen anything like this." The symbols particularly capture his attention. They flow across the beam-like pieces in patterns that suggest intelligence and purpose, but not human intelligence, not human purpose. The characters seem to shift slightly when he's not looking directly at them, as if they exist in dimensions his eyes can't quite perceive. "Where exactly did you find this?" Wilcox asks, though Mac has already described the location twice. "About 75 miles north of town, out on the ranch, scattered across maybe 3/4 of a mile, like something came apart while it was moving fast." Wilcox nods, filing away details that might become important later. The pattern Mac describes suggests not a simple crash, but something that disintegrated while traveling at considerable speed. The debris field speaks of forces and energies beyond anything in his law enforcement experience. "Mac, I think this might be something for the military folks out at the base to examine," Wilcox says finally. "This is way beyond anything I'm qualified to identify." The telephone call to Roswell Army Airfield connects immediately. Within minutes, Wilcox finds himself speaking with Major Jesse Marcel, the base intelligence officer. Marcel's voice carries the professional competence of someone accustomed to dealing with unusual situations. But even over the phone, Wilcox detects genuine interest in what he's describing. "Major, we've got some debris here that rancher Mac Brazel found after that storm 3 nights back. Materials I can't identify, symbols that don't look like anything I've ever seen. Thought you might want to take a look." Marcel's response is immediate and decisive. "Sheriff, don't let anyone else handle that material. We'll have someone there within the hour." The wait passes in contemplative silence. Mac and Wilcox examine the debris repeatedly, each inspection revealing new details that deepen the mystery rather than resolving it. The materials seem to exist outside normal categories, belonging to no earthly classification either man can imagine. When the military vehicle arrives, Major Marcel steps out wearing the confident bearing of a career officer who has seen much of the world and its possibilities. But as he examines Mac's collection, his composed military demeanor shifts to something approaching wonder. Marcel handles each piece with the careful attention of someone trained to analyze unknown materials. His experience as an intelligence officer has exposed him to aircraft wreckage from around the world, enemy technologies captured during the war, experimental equipment developed by American scientists, pushing the boundaries of what's possible. But this collection challenges every category in his extensive knowledge. "Gentlemen," Marcel says quietly, his voice carrying the weight of genuine amazement. "I've never encountered anything like this. Not in all my years of service." The admission carries particular significance, coming from someone whose job requires identifying unknown objects and materials. Marcel's training has prepared him to recognize threats, to classify discoveries, to place unusual findings within existing frameworks of knowledge. Yet the debris spread across Sheriff Wilcox's desk belongs to no framework he knows. Plans are quickly made for Marcel to accompany Mac back to the debris field. The sheriff's office returns to its normal quiet routine, but something fundamental has shifted. The world suddenly seems larger, more mysterious, filled with possibilities that stretch beyond the boundaries of human experience. As the military vehicle disappears down Main Street, heading toward ranch country, where mysteries lie scattered across ancient desert, Wilcox sits alone with questions that will follow him for decades. What forces in the vast universe might have brought visitors to this remote corner of New Mexico? If the debris represents technology from beyond Earth, what does that mean for humanity's understanding of its place in the cosmic ocean? And how do you process the possibility that we may not be alone among the stars? The morning continues its progression toward noon, but Sheriff Wilcox's world has expanded in ways that will take a lifetime to fully comprehend. Chapter 4. The Intelligence Officer's Discovery. Major Jesse Marcel has seen war from the Pacific Islands to the corridors of Pentagon briefing rooms. He's examined enemy aircraft shot down over hostile territory, analyzed captured weapon systems, identified materials designed by the most advanced military technology on Earth. His trained eye can distinguish American aluminum from German steel, Russian electronics from Japanese engineering. But as his military vehicle bounces along dirt roads toward Mac Brazel's ranch, Marcel carries with him a collection of materials that fits no category in his extensive experience. The drive through desert country passes in contemplative silence. Mac Brazel sits beside him, occasionally pointing out landmarks, but mostly lost in thoughts about his extraordinary discovery. The rancher's weathered hands rest quietly in his lap, still remembering the feel of materials that seem to exist outside the normal rules governing matter and energy. Marcel finds himself thinking about the war, about the technologies that emerged from desperate necessity during humanity's darkest years. Radar systems that could see through darkness and storm. Jet engines that pushed aircraft beyond the speed of sound. Electronic computers that could calculate trajectories for artillery strikes. Even the atomic bomb itself, splitting matter to release energies that had powered the stars since the universe began. Each of these innovations had seemed impossible, until suddenly they became real. Perhaps what he's about to examine represents the next leap forward in human understanding, technologies developed in secret laboratories by minds pushing beyond accepted limitations. But something in his gut suggests a different explanation entirely. The debris field stretches farther than Mac's initial description suggested. Under the full light of midday sun, the pattern becomes clear to Marcel's trained eye. This isn't the concentrated wreckage of a simple aircraft accident. The materials are scattered in a long, narrow trail that suggests something came apart while traveling at tremendous speed. Marcel begins his examination with systematic thoroughness, photographing the scene, documenting the distribution of debris, cataloging each unusual finding. But as the afternoon progresses, his scientific objectivity gives way to something approaching awe. The metallic strips behave unlike any earthly material he's encountered. When folded, they spring back to perfect flatness with a force that seems to come from within the metal itself. When struck with rocks, they ring with musical tones but show no damage. When exposed to the flame of his cigarette lighter, they remain cool to the touch. The beam-like structures covered in hieroglyphic symbols particularly capture his attention. The markings flow in patterns that suggest language, but not human language. The symbols seem to shift slightly when he's not looking directly at them, as if they exist in dimensions his eyes can't quite perceive. Most intriguing of all are fragments of what appears to be foil, except this foil possesses properties that challenge everything Marcel knows about materials science. It's incredibly thin, almost weightless, yet stronger than steel. When crumpled into a ball, it immediately unfolds itself to perfect smoothness, without a single crease or wrinkle to show it was ever disturbed. Marcel finds himself handling pieces of debris that weigh virtually nothing yet feel substantial and real. Materials that seem to have been designed by minds operating from entirely different assumptions about how matter and energy interact. As the afternoon heat shimmers off the desert floor, Marcel fills several vehicles with the mysterious materials. Each piece is carefully documented, though he has no earthly category to place them in. The debris follows a distinct pattern across the landscape, heaviest concentrations at one end with lighter fragments scattered in a long tail extending nearly a mile across the rangeland. The pattern tells a story of something that came apart catastrophically while moving at speeds beyond anything in his aeronautical experience. But what kind of aircraft could have been constructed from materials that behave unlike anything produced by human technology? During a break in the recovery operation, Marcel finds himself standing alone in the vast desert silence, surrounded by fragments of the impossible. Above him, the afternoon sky stretches blue and infinite, the same sky that has watched over this land since before humans learned to make fire. He thinks about his daughter, about the world she'll inherit. Will it be a world where humanity finally learns it's not alone in the cosmic ocean? Where technologies from beyond Earth transform civilization in ways he can't begin to imagine? Where the boundaries between possible and impossible dissolve under the weight of evidence scattered across desert sand? The drive back to Roswell Army Airfield passes in thoughtful silence, vehicles loaded with materials that challenge the foundations of Marcel's worldview. As base security gates close behind them, he carries more than physical debris. He bears the weight of questions that stretch toward infinity itself. In his office that evening, Marcel spreads the most significant pieces across his desk and begins preparing reports that will travel up the chain of command to the highest levels of military authority. But how do you describe in official language materials that behave unlike anything in human experience? How do you document discoveries that might rewrite textbooks on physics and engineering? Outside his window, the desert stretches toward horizons where the first stars are beginning to appear in the darkening sky. The same stars that have guided travelers and dreamers since humans first looked up and wondered what lay beyond the edge of sight. Marcel picks up his telephone to make calls that will set in motion events far beyond his control. But for a moment, he simply sits in the growing darkness, holding fragments of mystery, wondering what forces in the vast universe might have scattered dreams across the ancient soil of New Mexico. The night wind begins to blow, carrying the scent of sage and secrets that dance just beyond human understanding. In offices and homes across the region, telephones will soon ring with urgent, quiet conversations about something that shouldn't exist, but undeniably does. Tomorrow will bring decisions that echo through decades. Tonight belongs to wonder, and the sense that everything humanity thought it knew about its place in the universe might need to be reconsidered under the infinite light of stars. Chapter 5. The Colonel's Impossible Decision. Colonel William Blanchard arrives at his office at Roswell Army Airfield before dawn, as has been his custom throughout a distinguished military career that spans 2 wars and the development of weapons that changed the nature of warfare itself. The morning air carries the cool promise of another blazing desert day, but today will test everything he believes about leadership, duty, and humanity's place in the universe. Major Marcel's report lies on his desk, accompanied by photographs and samples that challenge every assumption Blanchard holds about what's possible in this world. As commanding officer of the 509th Composite Group, he's accustomed to dealing with classified materials, experimental technologies, weapon systems that push the boundaries of human capability. But what Marcel has brought him exists outside any framework of earthly technology. Blanchard examines each photograph with the methodical attention of someone trained to analyze intelligence data. The debris field stretches across nearly a mile of rangeland in patterns that suggest catastrophic disintegration of something traveling at tremendous speed. Individual pieces show properties that belong more in science fiction than military intelligence reports. Marcel's written description chronicles materials that behave unlike anything in the Major's extensive experience. Metal strips that return to perfect flatness when bent. Beam-like structures covered in symbols that resemble no earthly writing system. Fragments so light they seem to float, yet incredibly strong and resistant to all attempts at damage or analysis. The implications stretch beyond military matters into questions about humanity's understanding of its place in the cosmic ocean. If these materials represent technology from beyond Earth, what does that mean for national security, for scientific knowledge, for the fundamental assumptions upon which human civilization has been built? Blanchard has spent his career making decisions under pressure, choices that affected thousands of lives and the outcome of global conflicts. He helped end the most terrible war in human history by commanding the units that dropped atomic weapons on Japan. But the decision facing him now carries consequences that stretch beyond any single conflict into the future of human understanding itself. At 0800 hours, Blanchard makes a choice that will reverberate through history. He authorizes a press release. The call goes to Lieutenant Walter Haut, the base public information officer. Haut is a straightforward man who believes in honest communication between the military and the American people they serve. The war is over. Democracy has triumphed over fascism. Secrecy, he believes, should be reserved for genuine threats to national security, not discoveries that might expand human knowledge. Walt, Blanchard says simply, his voice carrying the weight of momentous decision. We've recovered a flying disc. I want you to prepare a press release for immediate distribution. The words hang in the morning air like incense in a cathedral. A flying disc. In 1947, those words carry possibilities that stretch the boundaries of human imagination into realms previously reserved for science fiction and childhood dreams of adventure among the stars. Haut types the release on his manual typewriter, each keystroke echoing in the quiet office like drum beats marking a moment when history pivots toward new possibilities. The language is precise, military in its directness, revolutionary in its implications. The many rumors regarding the flying disc became a reality yesterday when the intelligence office of the 509th Bomb Group of the 8th Air Force, Roswell Army Airfield, was fortunate enough to gain possession of a disc through the cooperation of one of the local ranchers and the sheriff's office of Chaves County. By noon, the story races across telegraph wires to newspaper offices around the world. Radio announcers interrupt regular programming to share news that humanity may have encountered technology from beyond Earth. For a few precious hours, the world stands on the threshold of acknowledging that consciousness and intelligence exist among the stars, that we are not alone in the vast cosmic ocean. The Roswell Daily Record prepares an afternoon edition with headlines that will become legendary in the annals of human curiosity. RAF captures flying saucer on ranch in Roswell region. But even as ink flows across printing presses, other forces are setting events in motion that will transform revelation into cover-up, discovery into denial. Telephone calls flash between Roswell and higher military commands scattered across the United States. Washington awakens to news that requires immediate attention from the highest levels of government and military authority. Generals who spent the war managing information understand the implications of what Colonel Blanchard has authorized. By mid-afternoon, Brigadier General Roger Ramey, commander of the 8th Air Force, personally flies to Roswell from his headquarters at Fort Worth, Texas. His arrival signals a fundamental shift in how this unprecedented situation will be handled. Ramey is an experienced officer who understands both the power of information and the necessity of controlling it when national interests are at stake. As he examines the debris in a secure hangar at Roswell Army Airfield, he makes calculations that extend far beyond the military implications of the discovery. The world in 1947 balanced on the edge of new conflicts. The Cold War is beginning its deadly dance between superpowers armed with weapons that could destroy civilization. The last thing America needs, Ramey concludes, is panic about invaders from space, technologies that might be used by enemies, or discoveries that could destabilize the delicate balance of international relations. By evening, a second press conference is hastily arranged. This time the story changes completely. The debris, General Ramey announces to gathered reporters, represents nothing more exotic than remnants of a high-altitude weather balloon used for classified atmospheric research. Military equipment, certainly, but nothing more extraordinary than meteorological instruments designed to study wind patterns and atmospheric conditions at extreme altitudes. To support this explanation, different materials are displayed for the cameras. Conventional debris that any reporter can identify, aluminum foil, wooden sticks, rubber strips. The strange memory metal fragments have vanished. The beams covered with hieroglyphic markings are nowhere to be seen. Major Marcel stands beside the general, his expression carefully controlled. The same man who, hours earlier, described materials unlike anything in human experience now nods as Raimi explains away the mystery with mundane weather observation equipment. The press conference achieves its intended effect. Headlines around the world shift from flying saucer captured to weather balloon mistaken for UFO. The story that briefly suggested humanity was not alone in the universe fades into official silence and public embarrassment. As night falls over the desert where it all began, the extraordinary becomes ordinary through the power of official explanation. But in the hearts of those who touched the impossible, who held fragments of mystery in their hands, the memory burns bright as starlight, waiting for the day when truth might walk free under the infinite sky. Chapter 6. The Mortician's Strange Evening. Glenn Dennis works the quiet evening shift at Ballard Funeral Home, a peaceful establishment where families come to honor their departed loved ones with dignity and respect. The mortuary business in a small town like Roswell moves at the gentle pace of life itself, marking the natural rhythm of births and deaths that define human existence. Most evenings pass in contemplative quiet, Dennis attending to the administrative details that surround death with the same careful attention he gives to preparing bodies for their final rest. It's work that requires compassion, discretion, and an understanding of how grief transforms people in ways both subtle and profound. But on this July evening, his telephone rings with a call that will haunt him for the rest of his life. The voice on the line identifies itself as calling from Roswell Army Airfield, speaking in the clipped professional tones of military bureaucracy. But underneath the official language, Dennis detects an urgency that suggests something far more complex than routine-based business. "We need several small caskets," the caller says without preamble. "Child-sized, hermetically sealed. How quickly can you provide them?" Dennis, accustomed to the sorrows that bring people to his profession, asks the natural question, "Was there an accident involving children? What happened?" The response comes quickly, evasively, with finality that closes off further inquiry. "Just let us know if you can provide what we need and how soon we can get them." After hanging up, Dennis sits in the quiet of his office, troubled by something he cannot name. The request strikes him as unusual, not just for its specificity, but for the tone underlying the bureaucratic language. There's a tension in the caller's voice that suggests something unprecedented, something that requires the kind of sealed containers used only under the most unusual circumstances. Later that evening, Dennis drives to the base hospital on routine business, delivering supplies for a funeral service scheduled for the following day. The facility normally operates with the calm efficiency of military medicine, medical personnel going about their duties with professional competence and quiet authority. Tonight feels different. Military police patrol areas usually accessible to civilian contractors. Personnel move with heightened alertness, as if everyone is participating in something both unprecedented and deeply classified. There's an electric tension in the air, like the atmosphere before a thunderstorm, when the very molecules seem charged with potential energy. As Dennis completes his delivery, he encounters a nurse he's known for months. She's a competent, level-headed professional who has seen everything that military medicine can present, from training accidents to the lingering effects of wounds suffered during the war. But tonight, her usual composure appears shaken in ways that speak to encounters beyond her extensive medical experience. "Glenn," she says quietly, glancing around to ensure they're not overheard. "Something incredible has happened here today. Something that changes everything I thought I knew about what's possible." Her words are carefully chosen. but her meaning carries implications that stretch toward the stars themselves. She describes briefly in whispers observations that challenge her medical training and her understanding of biology itself. "They brought in bodies," she tells him, her voice barely audible above the hum of hospital equipment. "But not human bodies. Not from anywhere on Earth." The conversation is brief, interrupted by approaching footsteps that echo with military authority down hospital corridors. But in those few whispered sentences, Dennis encounters testimony that expands his understanding of what might exist in the vast universe beyond Earth's small sphere. Military personnel escort Dennis from the facility with polite firmness that carries unmistakable authority. He's asked not to return unless specifically requested for business matters, and advised that discretion regarding anything he might have observed or overheard would be appreciated for national security reasons. Driving home through the desert night, Dennis contemplates the strange confluence of events that has transformed his quiet evening into an encounter with mystery. The request for small sealed caskets, the unusual tension at the base hospital, a nurse's whispered testimony about bodies that defy conventional biological understanding. Above him, the stars shine with their eternal brightness, the same lights that have watched over Earth since before humans learned to make fire. Each point of light represents a sun, possibly warming planets, possibly nurturing life forms that might develop along pathways entirely different from terrestrial evolution. The questions that arise from this July night will follow Dennis for decades to come, not because he seeks attention or publicity, but because some experiences change a person fundamentally. Some encounters with mystery leave marks that time cannot erase, testimonies that demand preservation even when official silence makes speaking dangerous. In the years ahead, Dennis will describe his experiences carefully, always aware that his words carry implications far beyond their surface meaning. He will speak not just of what he observed, but of how it felt to stand at the edge of a secret that could transform humanity's understanding of its place in the cosmic ocean. But tonight, driving through the peaceful darkness of New Mexico desert, he simply wonders what forces in the infinite sky might have brought visitors to this remote corner of the American Southwest. The night wind carries the scent of sage and possibility across rangeland that has witnessed mysteries beyond human understanding. Somewhere in the darkness, in facilities secured behind military authority, personnel work with materials and perhaps beings that represent answers to questions humanity has asked since first looking up at the stars and wondering if consciousness exists beyond the boundaries of Earth. The desert keeps its secrets well, but sometimes those secrets leave traces in the memories of ordinary people who find themselves witnesses to the extraordinary. Dennis drives slowly toward home, carrying knowledge that official explanations cannot entirely erase, testimony that waits patiently for the day when truth might walk freely under the vast New Mexico sky. Chapter 7. The Weight of Official Silence. Major Jesse Marcel sits alone in his quarters at Roswell Army Airfield as midnight approaches, staring at hands that 12 hours earlier held fragments of the impossible. The same hands that examined materials unlike anything in his extensive military experience now tremble slightly as he contemplates the weight of what he's been asked to do. Earlier today, he stood before reporters and cameras, nodding as his commanding officer explained away mystery with mundane meteorological equipment. The debris Marcel had described in his initial reports as exhibiting properties not of this world became, through the alchemy of official explanation, nothing more exotic than weather balloon remnants scattered by desert winds. The transformation from revelation to cover-up happened with military efficiency. Phone calls from Washington, orders from general officers who understood the larger implications of what Colonel Blanchard had initially authorized. A rapid deployment of damage control that turned extraordinary discovery into embarrassing mistake. Marcel understands the necessity of following orders. His career has been built on the foundation of military discipline, the recognition that individual officers sometimes must subordinate personal convictions to larger organizational needs. But he's also an intelligence professional trained to recognize truth, to document facts, to report observations without coloration or interpretation. And his observations of the debris recovered from Mac Brazel's ranch challenged everything he thought he knew about what's possible in this world. The memory burns with crystal clarity, despite official attempts to reframe it. Materials that behaved like nothing in his considerable experience. Metal strips that returned to perfect flatness no matter how they were manipulated. Beam-like structures covered in symbols that resembled no earthly language or writing system. Most haunting of all, the fragments that seemed almost weightless, yet possessed strength beyond any terrestrial material he could identify. Pieces that felt warm to the touch despite spending cool nights under desert stars. Debris that seemed to shimmer with colors that shifted like aurora dancing across northern skies. In his private moments, away from official constraints and bureaucratic necessities, Marcel allows himself to consider possibilities that press releases cannot accommodate. If the materials came from beyond Earth, what did that mean for humanity's understanding of its place in the universe? What technologies might exist among civilizations that have mastered travel between the stars? What forms might intelligence take when it evolves under alien skies? Across town, Sheriff George Wilcox locks his office and walks slowly home along Main Street, lined with businesses that have served this community for decades. Roswell sleeps peacefully under starlight, most residents unaware that their quiet town briefly became the center of revelations that might have rewritten human understanding of reality itself. Wilcox has been asked, with polite firmness that carried implications of serious consequences, to refrain from discussing the debris Mac Brazel brought to his office. The request came through official channels with the weight of federal authority behind it. As an elected peace officer, Wilcox understands the delicate balance between serving his community and respecting legitimate government interests. But in the quiet hours before dawn, he finds himself staring up at stars that seem different now. Each point of light represents possibilities he never seriously considered before examining materials that challenged every assumption about what exists in the vast cosmic ocean surrounding Earth. Mac Brazel returns to his ranch and his sheep, but the desert feels transformed by what he discovered scattered across the rangeland after that July storm. What once seemed like a place of peaceful solitude now carries suggestions of vastness that extends beyond earthly horizons toward mysteries he can barely imagine. The debris field has been thoroughly cleared by military personnel who worked with methodical efficiency throughout the day. Every fragment, every piece of unusual material, every trace of the extraordinary has been collected and transported to facilities where it will disappear into classifications beyond public access. The desert shows no evidence that anything unprecedented ever occurred here. Wind and weather will soon erase even the tire tracks left by military vehicles, returning the land to its ancient appearance of untouched wilderness. Yet Mac remembers the weight of mystery in his weathered hands. The sensation of handling materials that seem to exist outside normal categories of matter and energy. The feeling that he had briefly touched something from realms beyond human experience or understanding. At Roswell Army Airfield, personnel work through the night in facilities secured by the highest levels of classification. Hangar doors remain sealed. Access is restricted to those with clearances that extend beyond routine military secrets into areas where national security intersects with questions about humanity's place in the universe. Official reports will describe conventional explanations for everything that transpired: weather observation equipment, high-altitude research balloons, classified atmospheric studies conducted for legitimate meteorological purposes. The paperwork will be filed, the incident closed, the extraordinary transformed into the routine through bureaucratic alchemy. But in quiet conversations between trusted colleagues, in private moments when professional masks slip away, questions persist that official answers cannot entirely satisfy. What forces in the vast universe might have brought technology to this remote corner of New Mexico? If consciousness exists beyond Earth's boundaries, what does first contact mean for the future of human civilization? How do you announce to the world that everything they believed about their cosmic solitude might need fundamental reconsideration? The stars continue their eternal dance overhead, keeping secrets in depths of space that stretch beyond imagination. Each distant sun possibly warms planets where intelligence might have evolved along pathways entirely different from terrestrial experience. Each point of light represents possibilities that dwarf human ambitions and achievements. Lieutenant Walter Haut, the public information officer who earlier typed the press release that briefly acknowledged recovery of a flying disc, now prepares corrected statements that will reinforce the weather balloon explanation. The words come reluctantly from his typewriter, each keystroke marking the transformation of potential revelation into official denial. Haut believes in honest communication between government and citizens, in the democratic principle that people have the right to know about discoveries that might affect their understanding of reality. But he also understands the argument that some truths might be too destabilizing for public release, too revolutionary for societies built on assumptions about humanity's unique position in the cosmic order. The night wind grows gentle as dawn approaches, carrying the scent of sage across desert that has witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations, the passage of ages marked by geological rather than human time. In this ancient landscape, one night's mystery becomes part of a larger story that stretches back to when the first conscious beings looked up at stars and wondered what might exist in the infinite darkness between worlds. Chapter 8: Seeds and Desert Wind. 30 years pass like seasons in the New Mexico desert. The sagebrush continues its ancient dance with wind and weather. Stars shine with their eternal brightness above rangeland that keeps its secrets with the patience of geological time. Children grow up hearing stories about flying saucers and government cover-ups, tales that blend into local folklore like ghost stories told around campfires. But seeds planted on that July night in 1947 have been growing in darkness, waiting for the right season to bloom into something larger than official silence could contain. Major Jesse Marcel, now retired from military service and living quietly in Louisiana, sits on his front porch watching grandchildren play in the yard where Spanish moss drapes ancient oak trees like memories given physical form. Age has given him perspective on the extraordinary events he witnessed decades earlier. Time has also provided distance from military constraints that once demanded his silence. In careful, measured words, chosen with the precision of someone who understands the weight of testimony, Marcel begins sharing his memories with researchers who have come seeking truth about what happened in the desert that distant summer. His account carries the gravity of decades of contemplation, the authority of a man who touched mystery and was forever changed by the experience. "I was familiar with all materials used in aircraft and in air travel," Marcel tells his visitors, his voice carrying the slow cadence of age and reflection. "This was nothing like that. It was not anything from this world. I'm convinced it came from somewhere else entirely." His words travel across the country through books and documentaries, television programs, and magazine articles that treat the Roswell incident not as government embarrassment, but as potentially the most significant event in human history. Each retelling plants new seeds of curiosity in minds ready to consider possibilities beyond conventional explanation. Stanton Friedman, a nuclear physicist who abandoned traditional academia to investigate reports of unidentified flying objects, begins assembling testimonies from witnesses who were present during those pivotal days in July 1947. His methodical scientific approach lends credibility to accounts that might otherwise be dismissed as fantasy born from too much science fiction and too little critical thinking. Friedman's investigation reveals patterns that suggest shared experience of something genuinely unprecedented. Military personnel describe debris recovery operations involving materials unlike anything in their extensive training. Civilians report observations that corroborate rather than contradict each other, testimonies that interlock like pieces of a vast puzzle depicting encounters with technology from beyond Earth. Glenn Dennis, now an elderly funeral director whose hair has turned white as desert sand, shares his memories of that strange evening when military personnel called requesting small sealed caskets. His account adds dimensions to the story that extend beyond mere debris recovery into questions about what might have been discovered intact among the scattered fragments. Other witnesses emerge from decades of silence like flowers blooming after desert rain. Base personnel who were ordered to clean up crash sites. Local residents who saw unusual military activity during those July days. People who carried fragments of extraordinary experience for 30 years, waiting for a cultural moment when their testimonies might be received with serious consideration rather than ridicule. Each account adds detail to a picture that grows increasingly difficult to explain through conventional means. The stories corroborate each other in ways that suggest genuine shared experience rather than collaborative fiction. Witnesses describe similar materials, similar official responses, similar pressures to maintain silence about events that challenge their understanding of reality. Mac Brazel has passed away, carrying his memories beyond the reach of researchers and investigators. But his initial discovery set in motion events that continue to ripple through time like circles spreading across still water when stones are thrown into peaceful depths. The official explanation remains unchanged after 3 decades. Weather balloon, classified military project conducted for legitimate atmospheric research purposes. Nothing more extraordinary than meteorological equipment scattered across rangeland by summer storms that regularly sweep across the desert southwest. But the cumulative weight of witness testimony begins to challenge official narratives with the steady pressure of water wearing away stone. Multiple accounts from credible sources create momentum that bureaucratic silence cannot entirely contain or redirect. Television producers recognize compelling material for documentaries that explore mysteries hidden behind government classifications. Authors sense public fascination with questions about humanity's place in a universe that might be populated by intelligence far older and more technologically advanced than terrestrial civilization. Hollywood screenwriters understand the dramatic possibilities inherent in first contact scenarios. Stories that ask fundamental questions about how humanity would respond to definitive proof that consciousness exists beyond Earth's boundaries. Slowly, like dawn breaking over eastern mountains, the Roswell incident begins its transformation from classified military matter to cultural phenomenon that captures imagination around the world. Tourist buses start arriving in the small New Mexico town that briefly became the center of humanity's closest approach to acknowledging contact with intelligence from beyond the solar system. Visitors come seeking connection to mystery, hoping to stand where extraordinary events might have unfolded decades earlier. Local businesses adapt to serve curiosity seekers drawn by possibilities and wonder. Hotels offer UFO packages for guests who want to visit the crash site and meet witnesses who still live in the area. Restaurants create menus featuring items with space-related names, acknowledging the cosmic questions that brought their customers to this remote corner of the American Southwest. The International UFO Museum opens on Main Street, not far from where Sheriff Wilcox first examined fragments that challenged everything he thought he knew about materials and their properties. Display cases hold replicas of debris described by witnesses. Photographs and documents tell stories that official sources neither confirm nor entirely deny. Yet beneath the commercial aspects of UFO tourism lies something deeper and more significant than mere entertainment. A hunger for connection to mysteries larger than daily existence. A yearning to believe that consciousness and intelligence exist beyond Earth's boundaries, that humanity is not alone in the vast cosmic ocean that stretches between the stars. As night falls over the desert where it all began, stars shine with their eternal brightness above land that has witnessed mysteries beyond human understanding. Each point of light represents possibilities that stretch imagination toward infinite horizons where questions about consciousness, intelligence, and humanity's place in the universe wait for answers that may come from beyond the edge of earthly experience. The truth about what happened during those July days in 1947 continues its patient journey toward whatever revelation awaits in the infinite depths of space and time. Like seeds scattered by desert wind, the questions raised by witness testimony take root in minds ready to consider that the universe might be far stranger, far more populated with intelligence, far more wonderful than official explanations can accommodate. In the growing quiet of night where dreams begin their gentle journey toward morning consciousness, the story of Roswell persists as humanity's closest encounter with the possibility that among all those stars, among all those distant suns, other minds might be looking back at our small blue world and wondering if they too are alone in the cosmic ocean that connects all consciousness across the infinite darkness between worlds. Sleep comes peacefully to those who let their minds wander among such possibilities, carried toward rest by questions that stretch as far as imagination can reach, as deep as wonder can travel, as high as hope can climb towards stars that keep their secrets in light that has traveled across vast distances to reach eyes capable of seeing beauty in the night sky. Sweet dreams among the infinite stars, where mystery dances with possibility and truth waits patiently for the moment when humanity is ready to embrace its place in a universe far stranger and more wonderful than official explanations dare suggest.